The many years of history have occasionally been subject to mysterious events or strange people. These phenomena often remain unexplained for the years to come, leaving all baffled. Number 10. The color blue, or rather the absence of it, sparked debate among scientists, linguists, and historians. It was the debate about ancient societies not being able to see the color blue. Further inquiries into this were made by Geiger, a philologist, who's someone who studied written records. Through his investigation, he found something quite strange. Within ancient Greek, Hindi, Chinese, Icelandic, and Hebrew text, there's a complete absence of the color blue. When thinking of the color blue naturally occurring in nature, not a whole lot of examples come up. The color blue is not one that's abundant in nature. It's almost not surprising that it doesn't show up in ancient texts. But there is one naturally occurring big blue bit that can be seen almost every day: the sky. It was found that blue was only invented about 5,000 years ago, when the Egyptians had started to make blue pigments using azurite and malachite. The late start of this color has been reflected in more modern languages, such as Korean, whose term for blue refers to both blue and green. While blue had been a naturally occurring color, it didn't exist as a concept for thousands of years, possibly due to its rarity. To put the color's rarity into perspective, there's less than 10% out of the 280,000 flower plants that will produce a blue flower. Researchers were able to identify red, brown, yellow, and orange pigments that were present in animals as well as birds. These pigments would come from the diets of the animals, all of which were responsible for the colors of their skin, eyes, and so forth. The color blue appears to be in the middle of a mystery that links biology, linguistics, art, and psychology. Many believe that we're able to perceive blue as a distinct color, and the fact that it appears as a primary color on the color wheel only supports this theory. But this concept possibly didn't exist for ancient cultures. It was even found that some of today's cultures don't perceive blue the same way that those in the West do. That being said, we humans do have visible veins in our arms or legs that must have been noted by these ancient societies, along with the skies and the odd flower or two. Yet its concept was left out of such historical writings for quite some time. But it's been found that some languages use different words to describe the same color. In some Slavic languages, the word for blue can also be used to describe blonde hair. It's since been an ongoing debate as to whether or not these societies could see the color, or if the perception of it only came sometime later, possibly through evolution. For now, it's an uncertain enigma as to whether or not these ancient civilizations had knowledge of such a color, but it certainly is interesting that it does not occur in any writings or inscriptions from that era. The color is often referred to as the one that the ancient people couldn't see. Number 9. In June of 1980, a 56-year-old coal miner named Sigmund Adamski had left his West Yorkshire home to do some shopping. He never returned, but was later discovered in the town of Todd Moran. Alan Godfrey, a local officer, had been sent to investigate what had happened. Arriving on the scene, Godfrey found the man's hair had been roughly chopped and had a 1 day's growth of beard, even though he'd already been missing for a few days. Markings had also been noted on the man's person, and the ointment that was used to treat these abrasions could not be identified by forensics. Godfrey would later state that he's open-minded and that he didn't rule out the idea that Adamski had been subjected to an alien abduction. 5 months had passed, and Todmorden would again become the center of media attention. This time, it had been Alan Godfrey himself. One morning, the young policeman was sent out at 5 in the morning to deal with a report on cattle that had escaped onto a housing estate. He explained that while attending to this report, he was stopped in his tracks by what he claimed to be an unidentified flying object. It appeared as a bright light in the sky and was described as a diamond-shaped aircraft that was rotating and had been at least 20 feet high and 14 feet wide. Godfrey quickly scribbled down a basic sketch of what he had seen and grabbed the police radio that had been in the car to report on the incident and call for backup. Unfortunately, the line had failed. All of a sudden, the object disappeared in what the officer described as a bright flash. He then found himself sitting inside of his car, 30 yards further down the road from where he had initially been. Godfrey looked at his watch and noticed that it was 25 minutes later than what it had been just a moment ago. What's strange is that his boot had been split open, and he had an itchy abrasion on his foot. Confused and dazed, he made his way back up the road where he had seen the light, only to find that the road had dried up, despite the fact that it had been raining just moments before. He would then go on to find the cows that he'd been looking for. They'd been in a park next to the road where they'd not previously been before the appearance of the object. Upon reporting his encounter, Godfrey was met with ridicule and skepticism, and would later go on to see a hypnotist in hopes that it would aid him in figuring out what he had witnessed. While under hypnosis, Godfrey remembered that he'd been blinded by this light and became unconscious shortly thereafter. He would then tell the hypnotist that when he woke up, he found himself in a strange room where he had undergone an examination by several small creatures, as well as a taller humanoid that had a beard. Once again, he would be met with mockery and raised eyebrows. In the aftermath, Godfrey would soon be visited by the Ministry of Defense, as well as correspondence from a Russian scientist. For years, he would continue to be ridiculed, which prevented others of the same circumstances from coming forward with their stories and encounters. High-ranking officials, such as Christopher Mellon, who's a former U.S. Secretary of Defense and Intelligence, as well as Luis Elizondo, a former director of AATIP, had insisted that there are indeed aircraft in our skies that don't obey the standard laws of physics. It was later theorized by some that the officer had been sleep-deprived, and the encounter he'd had was merely a dream. According to a former UFO investigator for the Ministry of Defense, Nick Pope, Godfrey's encounter is more likely to be genuine, based on the fact that he had a lot to lose by coming out about such an encounter, but maintained that his story was factual. Number 8. It was during Apollo 17's last flight to the moon that an anomalous image was taken close to an area called the Geophone Rock. The image was initially cataloged as a blank image by NASA, but it was later found to not be a blank image at all. This image had revealed some pyramidal structures, but NASA had never given a credible version of this picture. After noise reduction had been applied to the blank image, and the contrast had been increased, the photograph began to reveal a pyramid on the surface of the moon. After careful observation, one may see two different structures, one of which is the pyramid shape, and the other that appears to be a bar-like form found on the left corner of the bottom of the picture, which may be the side of a second pyramid. Apollo 17 was carried out by NASA in December of 1972, and it carried an LRV rover that had 2 seats where the astronauts could perform necessary extravehicular activities on the moon. The astronauts were equipped with a Hasselblad camera that was used to snap images during the mission, and allowed them to freely use their hands. The film for the camera was tucked within a cartridge that would be replaced once it had ended. This peculiar image was numbered as AS17135-20680, which can be found in the NASA Multimedia Library, along with other images from the mission. That being said, there's still no explanation from researchers or NASA as to what these pyramids are that had formed in this image. Some suggest that there really are pyramids on the moon, along with alien life forms. Some have suggested that the alleged pyramid structure was likely that of other areas of the rover, since the photo had been snapped in a panoramic mode. Some of these suggestions, though, were debunked, such as the theory of it being the corner of one of the seats in the rover. An individual named Mr. Data stated that he had overlapped the images, one of the rover seat and the other of the alleged pyramid, and revealed that when the images are scaled to the exact dimensions, they appear out of line. It was also found that when the contrast of this image is adjusted, it doesn't appear to show any distinctions of the rover seat, which has a grid cover. While various theories as to what this may be have come to light over the years, it's never been confirmed as a glitch, a pyramid, or a shadow. The image in question, known as the Geophone Rock anomaly, has been left just as that, an anomaly. Number 7. On the 26th of May, 1828, an unknown youth was discovered roaming the public square in Nuremberg, Germany. The teenager had worn ripped and tattered clothing and gripped an envelope that contained 2 letters. One letter had been addressed to the local cavalry captain, asking him to take the kid into the charge. It was allegedly written by a poor laborer who had found the boy and raised him, but was unable to care for him any longer. The second letter, that was dated as 1812, was said to be written by the mother of the boy, but it had not been signed as such. It had stated that the father had passed away and she could no longer care for him, and that he was being sent to join the military. The young boy was believed to be just under the age of 18, but his exact age was never confirmed. He appeared confused and didn't have the ability to write or read anything other than his name, which was Caspar Hower. When Caspar was questioned about his life, he couldn't say who he was or where he came from. All he knew was his own name. He also exhibited strange behavior, such as preferring water and bread rather than meat and vegetables, in addition to having no civilized manners. After just mere weeks of his arrival, Caspar was able to learn to read and write, and the next year he would capitalize on his newfound fame, after he had published an autobiography. It was in this publication that he would detail how he'd spent his whole life in a dark room, where he slept on straw and was fed by strangers. The boy soon became famous through the hundreds of books, articles, and films that had been written about him. Upon his arrival, the boy had been taken care of by George Dahmer, who was an educationist, possibly resulting in his quick ability to learn to read and write. In 1832, he would then be taken into the protection of the 4th Earl of Stanhope. He was then sent to Ansbach, where he would go on to become the clerk and the president of the Court of the Appeals Office. It was alleged that Caspar Hower was the hereditary prince of Baden. This statement was later proven false, along with other mythical stories of his origins. It was uncertain as to where the young boy had actually come from, and how he had wound up in the public square on that day. His mother was never identified, nor was the laborer who claimed to have cared for him. It was also never confirmed if the story about the small, dark room had been factual. And so the question of who was Caspar Hower has never been answered completely. Number 6. The Etruscan civilization had played a key role in the development of the Romans. They had influenced the Romans' social practices, including the triumph and gladiators, as well as their religion. The language of the Etruscan civilization had also influenced the development of the Latin language. But we understand very little about this language, as it's not been deciphered in its entirety. This means that we're unable to ascertain the full contribution that the civilization gave to classical civilization, and much of it remains a mystery. The Etruscan people were an enigmatic group who had dominated northern parts of Italy and Corsica from around the 10th to the 4th century BC. While they'd not been united in a political sense, they shared a common culture and religion. It's said that the Etruscan kings had ruled over Rome, and it's argued that they had founded the city. Etruria would later become conquered by the Romans and absorbed thereafter, and so their cultural identity became lost. Archaeologists have since recovered around 13,000 inscriptions from Mediterranean graves and monuments. These inscriptions were found to be examples of the Etruscan language, which is an enigma on its own. It's been established that the language is not Indo-European, and others suggested that it could have been a language isolate. A language isolate refers to a natural language with no demonstrable genetic relationship with any other language. It was found, though, that it did show similarities with extinct languages, such as Rhaetian. It's likely that Etruscan was the relative to a much earlier language that may have even dated back to millennia, or even before the Neolithic era. Etruria's city-states had been influenced by the Greeks as well as the Phoenicians, whom they traded with and fought on occasion. It's believed that the Etruscan alphabet was widely based on the Greek writing system, but others suggest that the 26-letter alphabet was based on the Phoenician system. Judging by the surviving inscriptions, it's thought that the women and men were illiterate, which had been a unique trait for this particular period. Experts in this field have not been able to fully decipher the language, resulting in the lack of knowledge on the civilization's history, religion, and literature. This is despite hundreds and hundreds of years of dedicated study and research, as well as the discoveries of passages of texts and inscriptions. One unique feature that's present in the alphabet is that it's read from left to right and right to left. Based on the studies that went into this language, Etruscan may have sounded incredibly strange to modern ears. It's according to ancient lore that the Etruscans had descended from the mysterious Lydians. Herodotus explained the myth about the Lydians, who, under King Tyrannus, had led their land that had been famine-stricken in Asia Minor. They sailed west to find a new base in Italy. The narrative cast the civilization as an exotic one with an Eastern heritage, but their origins remain quite a mystery, much like their forgotten language. Number 5. Harry Potter fans may immediately recognize the name Nicholas Flamel, the French wizard and alchemist who was the only known creator of the Philosopher's Stone, a substance that had incredible powers in the first novel and movie, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Nicholas had been a friend to the Hogwarts headmaster, Albus Dumbledore. The alchemist had been mentioned briefly on Dumbledore's chocolate frog card. Nicholas had emerged as an intriguing character among these magical luminaries, but what some fans may not have known is that he was a real-life person. In addition to appearing in Harry Potter, Nicholas Flamel was also mentioned in Michael Scott's The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel, as well as the Da Vinci Code written by Dan Brown. Of course, none of these retellings captured the truth of the intriguing figure. It's believed that Nicholas had been born outside of Paris in 1330. He was a bookseller who'd been married and widowed twice. With his wife, she'd brought some fortune, which allowed the couple to obtain properties as well as earn a reputation as prolific philanthropists. According to the records, Nicholas had been the owner of 2 shops and was a scribe. He had allegedly passed away in 1418 and was buried underneath a headstone of which he himself had made. It's widely believed, though, that he'd not passed away, and that he and his wife had run away and used their alchemical knowledge to protect themselves from mortality. It's been suggested that a stranger had come to Nicholas and presented him with a rare manuscript that was recognized from his dreams, in which an angel had told him that he would see in it what no one else was able to see. The manuscript had been written by Abraham and ultimately sparked alchemic curiosity within Nicholas. It was written in Greek as well as Hebrew, among other languages. After trying for 21 years to decipher the text, Nicholas eventually confided in a maestro who taught him just enough to translate the manuscript. Through 21 pages, it's believed that the alchemist had mastered the art of Hermeticism, which granted him the knowledge to create the Philosopher's Stone. The stone is believed to give the beholder the power of immortality, as well as turn metal into gold. This timeline had appeared to sync with Nicholas's sudden ascendance to wealth, which had sparked an investigation from King Charles VI. Additionally, the symbol for the Philosopher's Stone is incredibly similar to the symbol found in the last 2 Harry Potter books. Nicholas has also popped up alongside Isaac Newton, who referenced his alchemical skills, as well as in the 1800s work by Victor Hugo, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The rumors that circulated stating that Nicholas had created the Philosopher's Stone, or the elixir for eternal life, had been supported by the fact that the man lived well into his 80s. Such a thing was never heard of in the medieval times, but it is suggested that his long life was due to his wealth, allowing him proper food and accommodation. The idea that Nicholas Flamel was an alchemist who discovered the secret to eternal life, and was able to create a substance to produce such an effect, remains an unanswered mystery to this day, but it's one that's captured the imaginations of many. Number 4. The world's most consistent thunderstorm is referred to by a few names, including the Hector cloud, the Hector thunderstorm, or Hector the convector. The storm had gained its name through World War II pilots as they flew past the cloud, which had a consistent formation, an odd-looking shape, and an almost static location. Hector is situated in the Tiwi Islands that lie off the coast of the Northern Territory of Australia, north of the city of Darwin, and had served as a perfect beacon of navigation for mariners as well as pilots, including those during the war who'd use it as a beacon when traveling between Australia and Papua New Guinea. The storm cell is created by convection, which allows it to tower above the islands and can even reach a height high enough that it climbs through the tropopods. It was found that the winds present in the storm can climb up to 12.4 miles in the air. What's even more strange about this natural mystery is that it forms every single day right above the islands between the months of September and December. It was found to rise above Melville and Bathurst around 3 o'clock every afternoon, with slight minute fluctuations. The clouds can be seen all the way from Darwin on mainland Australia. According to the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, the Melville and Bathurst Islands were found to be almost ideal places for convection. The 2 islands are both pyramid-shaped, which results in the ocean breeze coming to the shore and colliding with the island's pinnacle. A similar event was found to occur in Ontario when breezes from lakes collide with the air and crash into each other. When such an action occurs, there's no place for it to go but up. It was also found that Hector does not form exactly the same way. and is subject to slight variations, but is formed out of the same process each time. On the days when there's a single potent cell, one can see the sharp outflow boundary that extrudes beneath the storm. These boundaries are found to form due to the cloud's downdrafts beneath the stormy formation. Hector's predictability also makes it the perfect subject for thunderstorm studies and researchers who can rely on its punctuality. According to the Bureau of Investigation, Hector is one of the most studied storms on Earth, but some questions have been left unanswered. The cloud has also been said to be a mesoscale phenomenon. Mesoscale refers to the study of atmospheric phenomena such as thunderstorms, downslope windstorms, and squall lines with a spatial scale between 10 and 100 kilometers. Shepard, who's with the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, stated that a tropical atmosphere is primed for thunderstorm formation in the wetter seasons, when the sea breeze convergence provides a lifting trigger. He also noted that although Hector may be viewed commonly in the warming months between September and December, in the southern hemisphere, summer is experienced between December to February, and it may also occur from January to March in the rainy season. Hector may also stick around well into April if the temperatures stay warm enough. The rainy season does mean that there's a lot of rain in the area, which has been accredited to Hector itself. The average annual rainfall for the area is around 2,014 millimeters or 79 inches. 30 kilometers east, yearly rainfall is about 1,500 millimeters or 61 inches. Shepard also explained that if there's a monsoonal flow from a westerly direction, Hector may not occur. Monsoons are known to suppress sea breezes, which could prevent the formation of the storm. Hector has been added to the list of unusual weather phenomena, as not everything can be known about these strange formations just yet. Number 3. The Decmont Woods Incident, or the Robert Taylor Incident, is one that finds itself among the various reports of UFO sightings. What's strange about this report was that it had actually warranted an investigation by police officials. Robert had rips in his pants that were treated as evidence of some sort of assault, but the officers couldn't quite figure out what had happened to the 61-year-old man. He was described as a war hero and a churchgoer, and was respected within the community who believed that this story had been sincere. And the story goes as follows, beginning on the 9th of November of 1979. In his testimony, of which he would maintain for the rest of his life, Robert expressed that he had seen a dome-shaped object that was 30 feet high and 6.4 meters in diameter. It was seen in a forest clearing close to the West Lothian New Town. He explained that 2 spheres covered in spikes had then rolled out of the machine and drifted towards him. It was at this point that Robert had lost consciousness, but was aware that his legs were being grabbed on both sides. He would wake up 20 minutes after this in a disorderly manner. He alleged to the officers that he was alone and working on the fences at Decmont Woods, around 10:30 that morning, when he'd seen the curious spaceship. It was recounted that after the spheres had rolled out, a strong burning odor filled the air. It was further detailed that when he awoke, the clearing had been emptied and a pattern of strange markings was left behind. The man was in a shaken state as he neared his van, and due to this he unfortunately found himself in a ditch and had to make his way home in a dazed condition. As soon as he was able to return home, he had told his wife, Mary, of the incident, and due to being so shaken up, the police were called. The attending officers would come to find that they were inquiring into an assault by extraterrestrials on a forester. Detective Constable Ian Wark, who was one of the scene's investigators, had come to the clearing where a fair amount of police personnel had already been waiting. He expressed that he had seen some strange marks on the ground. The marks were detailed as being 32 distinct holes that were each 3.5 inches in diameter. Additionally, there were marks that were similar to those that a caterpillar track fitted with a bulldozer would make. The detective then approached Robert's employer, Livingston Development Corporation, to see if they had any sort of machinery that may be the culprit of the strange markings. After careful examination, none of the machinery in their possession was consistent with what was in the clearing. It was noted that the marks had been found only in this clearing. They had not come from anywhere, nor had they gone. They were just there as if a helicopter were to have landed from the sky. In the official police report, it was suggested that an object weighing several tons had stood there, but there was no evidence to show that it was towed or driven away. As for the rips on Robert's pants, those were sent in for analysis, and it was found that they'd been created by being hooked and pulled in an upwards motion. Robert had further detailed that the texture of the UFO had been like that of sandpaper, and it was a dark metallic material. On the outer rim of the craft, there had been small propellers lining the circumference. Various theories have since risen, ranging from mini strokes to a genuine extraterrestrial encounter. It was never confirmed if Robert had suffered from some sort of ailment resulting in a mirage, or if aliens had performed some sort of testing on the Forester. Number 2. The first recorded story of an alien abduction in the United States that had received national attention was that of Betty and Barney Hill, a couple who were from New Hampshire. The two had alleged that they'd been kidnapped by extraterrestrials in 1961, but another story emerged dating back to 1957, which speaks of an account of a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Vias Boas. The event was said to have occurred on the evening of the 14th of October, when the farmer had been in the process of plowing the fields of his farm along with his family. It had not been odd for them to be working at night due to the heat that they would experience during the day. It's detailed that they'd seen a ball of red light in the sky that they couldn't directly look at. Boas, however, began to get closer to the strange object, but as he did, it would move away as though it was playing some sort of game. The object then emitted several light beams before disappearing into the night. But this would not be the end of Boas's experience. 2 nights later, on the 16th of October, the farmer had been in the field by himself on his tractor when he saw a red star in the sky above. As it began to expand, he found that it had been the same light that he and his brothers had witnessed previously. This time, the object didn't flee, but rather came right up to Boas and revealed its egg-like shape. It appeared to be some sort of spacecraft with a revolving dome with a bright red light on top. The egg-shaped alien vehicle then extended 3 legs and softly touched down on the field. It then opened up to reveal a 5-foot-tall alien creature that wore gray overalls and a helmet. The farmer proceeded to turn the tractor around and try to flee from the area, but ultimately decided to run on foot. It didn't take long for the extraterrestrial to catch up to him. The first humanoid was now accompanied by 3 more aliens, who each looked the same and communicated through sounds of barking and yelping. Boas unfortunately could not fight against these creatures, and he was physically dragged to their UFO. Once he was on board, the farmer was placed into a brightly lit room that would be filled with a gas causing him to become ill. Soon, he was paired with an alien who had long platinum hair and blue cat-like eyes. Boas had detailed that the mission had been to create a human-alien hybrid creature that would be raised on the planet from which these extraterrestrials had originated. Once he was returned to Earth, he noticed his skin was burned and had gone to a medical center. At this center, a reputable doctor named Olavo Fontes had diagnosed Boas with radiation burns. The doctor also had contact with an American UFO research group called APRO. Boas was uncertain as to how he may have gotten these burns, and only remembered minor details as the ones featured here. The majority of scientists deny that these abduction stories are real, and place them into categories such as hoaxes or abnormal psychological states. An American researcher named Peter Rogerson had questioned Boas's narrative and argued that an article about an alien abduction had appeared in a magazine in November of 1957. He further noted that the story was popularized in 1958, and that the farmer had predated his encounter to a year prior in order to give it more credibility. Rogerson was also suggesting that it was stories such as Boas's that had influenced narratives such as that of the ufologist George Adamski. It's uncertain if this encounter had happened or not, but if it had not, then it's rather curious as to how the farmer had suddenly got burns that are consistent with radiation. Number 1. After the 1947 Roswell incident, there was a quick rise in UFO reports and activity, which would last for decades. These reports would soon enter the consciousness of the public, and people would begin to claim that they had personal experiences with aliens or aircraft. Thereafter, UFO conventions began, and proved to be rather profitable, while the public's fascination with extraterrestrials began to grow. But no one was expecting to encounter a real alien during one of these conventions. One of these events was held in August of 1954, on top of the United States' Mount Palomar, a height of 1,872 meters or 6,140 feet. The gathering was being promoted by 3 individuals who had claimed to be contactees, including George Adamski, Truman Bethram, and Daniel Fry. Journalists, FBI agents, UFO witnesses, and many more had flocked to the event, but it's also possibly attracted some extraterrestrial visitors. It was during this event that those who attended spotted a woman who'd been accompanied by 2 men. While they continued through the crowds, their presence caused somewhat of a commotion. The 3 individuals were described as fair-skinned. The woman had blonde hair tied back into a bun, and her eyes were described as large and dark with thick eyelashes. She was further described as having some strange physical features, including a bone structure that protruded from the middle of her head, extending to her nose. This account only got even more strange when the woman was asked by the audience if she was a Venusian, or not a Venusian, to which she calmly said no. Earlier that day, Adamski had given a speech regarding aliens from the planet Venus. He stated that they seek to blend in with the human race and walk among them. His description of the Venusians almost matched that of the woman's appearance. A reporter who was working for one of the magazines, João Martins, had requested to take images of the group, but they had declined. But he managed to get some surprise images of them the next day, at the end of the gathering. After capturing an image of the first woman, Martins then rushed to get 2 more of the accompanying men. This had startled the group, and so they darted off into the woods nearby. Some who had attended the event even claimed to have seen a UFO leave the area not long after. There was no photographic evidence of this account, so it couldn't be proven if there was indeed a UFO that took off from this area. Martins had decided to dig deeper into this mysterious woman, and found that all 3 of the attendees had signed into the guest book. The woman was named Dolores Barrios, a fashion designer from New York, who was married and raised a large family. Her 2 friends had been Donald Moran and Bill Jackmart, and they had been musicians from California. While it was found that the trio was actual people, the speculations had failed to cease about their otherworldly origins. Alien investigators suggested that the name that the woman had given actually belonged to someone else, and that she was using it to fit in. There's been no proof to support such a theory, though, and it's noted that taking a new identity during this period had been linked to Cold War espionage as well as mob practices. While there was no actual reason to suspect that Dolores was an alien, many maintained that she had extraterrestrial origins, and so did her companions. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.